The ground moved under Emmett Cole's boots, and for a moment he thought it was a snake. He'd been walking the eastern boundary of his new property, counting fence posts he'd need to cut, when the earth beneath his right foot shifted with a hollow sound that didn't belong to solid ground. He stepped back and stamped his heel against the same spot. Hollow, empty space underneath. Emmett crouched and brushed the dirt aside. Beneath the thin layer of soil and sod, his fingers found wood, rough planks laid side by side and covered over to look like natural ground. A door. Someone had built a door into the earth and hidden it. He pulled his knife and pried the nearest plank upward. The smell hit him first. Smoke, sweat, the sour tang of unwashed bodies. Then the sound, a child's whimper, cut short by a woman's urgent whisper. Emmett lifted the plank fully and found himself staring down into a dugout, a room carved into the earth maybe 8 feet deep and 12 feet square, shored up with timber. A rough ladder led to a dirt floor where a woman stood with her body between him and 2 children, a rusted shotgun pointed at his chest, with hands that shook badly enough to rattle the barrel. "Get away from us," she said. Her voice was raw, scraped to nothing. "I'll shoot you. I swear to God I'll shoot you." Emmett raised both hands slowly. The woman was thin, too thin, the kind of gaunt that came from weeks of not eating enough. Her dress was filthy, her dark hair matted. Behind her, 2 children pressed against the earthen wall, a boy of maybe 7 with hollow cheeks and enormous eyes, and a girl no older than 4 clutching a corn-husk doll. "Ma'am, my name is Emmett Cole. I bought this land 3 days ago from the territorial office in Bowen. I didn't know you were down here." The woman's eyes, brown, bloodshot, wild with fear that lived past reason, searched his face. The shotgun didn't waver, but the effort of holding it was costing her. Her arms trembled, not just from fear, but from the deep exhaustion of a body running on nothing. "You bought the land," she repeated. 40 acres, including the creek and the timber stand. The office said it had been abandoned over a year. He paused. "But I'm guessing that's not the whole story." The shotgun dropped, not lowered, but dropped, her arms giving out. She caught herself against the ladder and made a sound that wasn't quite a sob. "The previous owner was my husband, and he didn't default. He was murdered." Emmett climbed down because the woman couldn't climb out. Her name was Nora Sutter. The boy was Caleb. The girl was Pearl. They'd been living underground for 7 weeks. The dugout was miserable. Nora had done what she could. Sleeping pallets from old blankets. A small fire pit vented through a clay pipe disguised above ground. A collection of roots and dried meat that represented whatever food remained. But the walls were damp. The air was thick. And the children had the pallid look of creatures who hadn't seen proper sunlight in months. Emmett sat on the dirt floor and listened to her story without interrupting, because the way she talked, fast, brittle, jumping between details, told him this was a woman who hadn't spoken to another adult in a very long time. Her husband Jack had filed the land claim 2 years ago, built a cabin, worked the land. The trouble started when a man named Virgil Dane decided he wanted the water rights. Dane ran cattle on the next property over with enough hired guns to constitute a small army, and the creek running through the Sutter claim was the only reliable water for miles. Virgil offered to buy 3 times. Jack refused every time. The water was the whole reason he'd filed here. Nora's hands twisted together in her lap. The 4th time, Dane didn't make an offer. He sent 3 men on a night when Jack was alone. I'd taken the children to town for supplies. We found him the next morning, shot twice in the back. The sheriff said it was drifters, said there was no evidence pointing to Dane, said a lot of things that added up to nothing while Virgil Dane sat in his ranch house and waited for me to leave. But you didn't leave. I had nowhere to go. My family is dead. Jack's family disowned him when he married me. I'm half Shoshone, and that was enough. She met his eyes with a directness that hit like a fist. So I burned the cabin myself so Dane couldn't take it. I moved the children into this dugout Jack had built as a root cellar, covered the entrance, and waited. Waited for what? I don't know. For Dane to lose interest. For someone to care that my husband was murdered. She looked at her children. For the world to stop being the kind of place that buries a woman and her children alive and calls it justice. Emmett sat with the weight of her words. He'd come to this territory to disappear, to leave behind a failed ranch in Missouri, a drinking problem he'd only recently beaten, and a string of bad decisions long enough to stretch across 2 states. He'd bought cheap land nobody wanted because cheap land was all he could afford, and he'd planned to spend the next year talking to nobody but his horse. First things first, Emmett said. I'm bringing food and water down here. Then we're getting you above ground. After that, we figure out the rest. You don't owe us anything, Nora said, but the protest was hollow, spoken by a mouth that remembered pride, while the body was too tired to enforce it. No, but I'm doing it anyway. He brought everything he had. Jerky, hardtack, dried apples, coffee, water from the creek. He carried Pearl up the ladder because she was too weak to climb, and the way she blinked in the afternoon sun, squinting and flinching like a small animal emerging from a burrow, cracked something in Emmett's chest he'd thought had sealed over years ago. Caleb climbed out alone, refusing help with the stiff pride of a 7-year-old who decided accepting assistance was a luxury his family couldn't afford. He stood in the grass and looked around with old eyes in a young face. Is the bad man going to come? Caleb asked. Nobody's coming to hurt you, not while I'm here. The boy studied him. My papa said that too. The words hit like a blade. Emmett crouched to Caleb's level. I know, and I'm sorry about your papa, but I'm telling you the truth. Caleb held his gaze, then nodded once. Not trust, the willingness to wait and see. Getting Nora out was harder. She stood at the base of the ladder with her hands on the rungs and didn't move. Emmett understood. Leaving the underground meant leaving the only safety she'd known for 7 weeks. The paralysis that came after sustained terror, when the body had been running on fear so long it didn't know how to stop. Take your time, he said. I'll be right here. She climbed, slowly, stopping twice to breathe. When she reached the top and took his offered hand, the grip that closed around his fingers was so fierce, it told him everything about how close she'd been to giving up, and how hard she'd fought not to. Emmett made camp near the old cabin foundation. He gave his tent to Nora and the children, built a fire, and cooked the best meal he could manage. Pearl ate like the food might vanish. Even Caleb's restraint crumbled after the first bites. Nora ate slowly, mechanically, watching Emmett with the wariness of a woman who'd learned that kindness from strangers came with a price. "Why did you buy this land?" she asked. "The territory's full of better claims." "I wasn't looking for the best. I was looking for the cheapest." "Why?" "Because I've spent 10 years making bad choices, and this was the only one I could afford. Had a ranch in Missouri that I drank into the ground. Had a wife who left because she was smart enough to know I wasn't going to stop." He paused. 14 months sober. I stopped because I ran out of things to lose. Nora studied him across the fire. "My husband was a good man, but he was stubborn. He knew Dane was dangerous, knew those men were coming. He stayed alone because asking for help felt like admitting he wasn't strong enough." She paused. "He died because he was too proud to be afraid. And you're alive because you weren't." Nora's eyes glistened, but the tears didn't fall. She'd used them all up weeks ago. "What happens now?" she asked. "Legally, you own the land. We're trespassing." "You're not trespassing. Your husband built that dugout, worked this soil, died defending this place. I bought a piece of paper from a territorial office. You paid for this land in blood." He met her eyes. "You and the children stay. We work the land together. Nobody is pushing you off this property." 3 days later, Virgil Dane came to see for himself. 3 men on well-fed horses. The man in front, silver-haired and fleshy, dressed too well for backcountry. "You'd be the new owner, Virgil Dane. I run the spread north of here." He smiled. $300 for this parcel, triple what you paid. "Not interested. This land isn't worth farming and won't support cattle. The only thing of value is the creek." The smile hardened. The previous owner took the same position. Didn't work out well for him. Emmett set down his axe slowly. "I heard. Shot in the back. Drifters. Terrible thing. It certainly is." Emmett let the words sit. "Mr. Dane, I'm not selling. And if drifters find their way onto my property at night, they'll find me considerably harder to kill than a man who wasn't expecting them." Dane studied him with calculating patience. "The offer won't last forever." He rode off with his men. Nora emerged from the tree line after they were gone, white-faced. "He knows you're here. He'll start watching. He'll see us. Then we stop hiding. I'm building a cabin on the old foundation, in plain sight. Hiding is what he wants. He killed my husband for doing exactly that. Your husband was alone. You're not anymore." The cabin went up in 3 weeks. Emmett worked from first light to last, felling timber from the pine stand and dragging it to the site with his horse. Nora appeared on the second morning with a cross-cut saw she'd hidden in the dugout and started cutting boards without a word. She was stronger than she looked. The weeks underground had weakened her body, but hadn't touched whatever iron ran through her core. Emmett watched her work with the growing recognition that Nora Sutter wasn't a woman who needed rescuing. She was a woman who needed a partner. They didn't talk much those first days. The work was too hard and too urgent for conversation. But Emmett noticed things, the way Nora checked the tree line every few minutes, scanning for riders with the automatic vigilance of someone who'd lived under siege. The way she positioned herself between the children and whatever direction she considered most dangerous, adjusting without thinking as the sun moved and the shadows shifted. The way she handled the saw, not with the awkwardness of a woman who'd been taught to use one, but with the worn familiarity of someone who'd been building alongside her husband for years. On the fifth evening, while the children slept in the tent and the skeleton of the cabin stood against the darkening sky, Nora sat beside the fire and said, "Jack taught me to build. Said it was foolish for only one person in a family to know how to keep a roof up." She stared at the flames. "I think he knew, somehow, that I'd need to know. He sounds like a man who planned for the worst. He was a man who loved his family enough to prepare them for a world without him. I hated him for it at the time. Thought he was being morbid." Her mouth twisted. "Turns out he was being practical." Emmett poured her more coffee. "The cabin's coming along faster than I expected. You're doing the work of 2 men out there. I'm doing the work of a woman who spent 7 weeks underground with nothing to do but think about what she'd build if she ever got the chance." Nora looked at him over the rim of her cup. "What about you? What were you planning to build out here before you found us?" "I hadn't gotten that far. The plan was more about running from than running to." "That's not a plan. That's a direction." Emmett almost smiled. "Fair point." Caleb hauled water and sorted nails with grim determination, performing every task Emmett gave him as if his place in the family depended on earning it. One afternoon, Emmett found the boy trying to lift a beam that weighed more than he did, his small face red with effort and frustration. "Caleb," Emmett set down his tools and walked over. "That beam's not going anywhere today. It needs 2 grown men to move it." "I can do it," Caleb insisted, straining against the wood with everything he had. "I know you think you can, but strength isn't about lifting things that are too heavy for you. It's about knowing when to wait for help." Emmett crouched beside him. "Your papa built that dugout by himself. That was strong. Your mama kept you alive in it for 7 weeks. That was stronger. But neither of them did it by trying to carry weight that would crush them. They did it by being smart about what they could handle and what they couldn't." Caleb let go of the beam. His eyes were bright, but he didn't cry. This boy had decided somewhere in those 7 underground weeks that crying was something he couldn't afford. "I don't want to be useless," he said quietly. "Son, you are the farthest thing from useless I have ever met. You kept your sister calm in that dugout. You kept your mother going when she wanted to quit. You did that at 7 years old. Most grown men couldn't have done what you did." Something shifted in Caleb's face, a loosening, a crack in the armor he'd built around himself. He didn't say anything, but that evening at supper, he sat next to Emmett instead of across from him, and Emmett understood that a bridge had been crossed. Pearl collected wildflowers and arranged them in tin cans around the worksite, creating explosions of color amid sawdust and mud. She'd started talking again, something Nora told Emmett she'd stopped doing after Jack died, and her high, clear voice, narrating the activities of bugs and birds, became the soundtrack of their days. She called Emmett the tall man and followed him around the property with the cheerful persistence of a duckling that had imprinted on the wrong species. When the cabin was finished, 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, a real door with iron hinges, Nora stood in the doorway and pressed her hand against the frame, the way someone would touch a living thing. Emmett saw her lips move in what might have been a prayer or a promise or just the word home, spoken so quietly even the wind couldn't hear it. Dane made his second move on a moonless September night. Emmett woke to smoke and was out the door with his rifle before flames reached the barn roof. Kerosene on the back wall, a clean practice job. The barn was beyond saving, but the cabin was upwind and the children were safe. Afterward, they stood in the yard looking at smoldering timber. "This is what he did to Jack," Nora said. "Piece by piece. The fence, then the chicken coop, then the barn, making it look like accidents until there was nothing left. Then he sent the men. Then we rebuild. And if he sends men with guns instead of kerosene," Emmett looked at her. "I've spent 10 years running from things, and I'm done. This is my ground, yours and mine. I will not be run off it." Nora stepped forward and took his hand. It was sudden and deliberate, carrying the weight of every decision she'd made since she burned her own cabin and took her children underground. Not a woman reaching for a man, an ally sealing an agreement deeper than words. "Then we fight," she said. They filed a formal complaint with the territorial office. Nora had been writing letters to a women's aid society in Helena for months, and a formidable woman named Margaret Avery arrived on the afternoon stage with legal documents and the expression of someone who ate men like Dane for breakfast. Margaret brought a surveyor, a lawyer, and a journalist from the Helena Herald. The journalist published an account of Jack Sutter's murder that made it impossible for the sheriff to keep looking the other way. The surveyor confirmed that the Sutter claim predated Dane's water rights by 18 months. The lawyer filed an injunction barring Dane from the property. Dane fought it with money and lawyers and the stubbornness of a man who couldn't believe he was losing. But 2 of his men quit before the hearing. A third gave testimony about the night Jack died that contradicted everything Dane had told the sheriff. The judge ruled in November. The land belonged to Nora Sutter and her heirs. Dane was ordered to pay restitution and warned that further harassment meant criminal charges. That evening, Emmett sat on the porch of the cabin he'd built and watched the sun go down over land that was finally, unambiguously Nora's. She came out and sat beside him. "The deed is in my name," Nora said, "but you built every wall in that house. You stood on this ground when Dane came and didn't move. I didn't do it for the land. I know. Why did you do it?" Emmett thought about the day he'd found them. Pearl blinking in the sunlight, Caleb's old eyes, Nora climbing that ladder 1 rung at a time. "Because you climbed out," he said. You'd been underground 7 weeks, half-starved, terrified. And when I opened that door, you pointed a gun at me and told me to leave. You didn't beg. You didn't collapse. You fought." He paused. "I've been running my whole life. You were the first person I'd met in years who was running toward something." Nora was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned her shoulder against his, the way two tired people lean together when they've been standing alone too long. "It looks like this," she said. They were married in the spring, in the cabin Emmett built on the foundation Jack Sutter had laid. Caleb stood as best man in a new shirt and the solemn expression of a boy who decided this was acceptable. Pearl threw wildflowers, the same ones she'd been arranging in tin cans since the walls went up, and when the preacher asked if anyone objected, she announced that she objected to wearing shoes and removed them immediately. Emmett Cole had come to Montana to disappear. He'd bought land no one wanted, because it was all he deserved. And in the dirt of that unwanted land, hidden underground like something buried and waiting to grow, he'd found a family that taught him the difference between being alone and being lost, and showed him that sometimes the things no one else wants are the things most worth fighting for.